You imagine adoption to be a story of hope, of healing, second chances, and love. But for 5 black children taken in by Jeanne Whitefeather and Donaldlantz, it turned into a descent into horror. They were promised a home. Instead, they were locked in a shed, abused, starved, and treated like property. No one came until a neighbor heard the faint sound of a child crying behind that locked door. In January 2025, a Kanawhacounty courtroom in West Virginia fell silent as the jury returned its verdict. Jeanne K. Whitefeather, in her 60s and stone-faced, and Donald Ray Lantz, sitting beside her, had been convicted of some of the most disturbing crimes West Virginia has ever seen: human trafficking, child abuse, forced labor, and a crime many couldn't believe was still happening in modern America: slavery. Yes, slavery. This was a historic moment, reportedly the first time human trafficking charges had ever been brought and convicted at the state level in West Virginia. And the victims were children. Adopted. Isolated. Hidden. But the worst part? These children had been deliberately selected, chosen, targeted, and exploited for years under the illusion of a loving home. Investigators say it wasn't an accident. The couple picked these kids because of their race. In effect, they were seen as easier to control. The story began far from West Virginia. Whitefeather and Lantz adopted the 5 siblings while living in Minnesota. Over time, they even collected more than $318,000 in adoption assistance payments from the state of Minnesota, taxpayer funds meant to support the children's well-being. Instead, they funneled that money into building their secluded life on a remote property. In 2018, they moved to a farm in Washington state, and then, in May 2023, they brought the family to a rural home in Sissonville, West Virginia. That's where the nightmare finally surfaced. In October 2023, vigilant neighbors spotted Lantz leading 2 of the older kids, a teenage boy and girl, toward a backyard shed. Within moments, he locked the door behind them. It was cold inside. There were no lights. And there were no sounds, except the muffled sobs of a child. Alarmed, the neighbors called the police. Deputies arrived and pried open the shed with a crowbar. Inside, they found the teens, barefoot, shivering, and severely malnourished. No water. No bedding. Just a porta-potty in the corner. But the horror didn't end there. In the main house, officers were met with squalor. One little girl was found alone, crying in a loft with no guardrail over a drop. The other children were living in filth, dirty clothes, and a strong stench of neglect. Deputies later noted the eldest boy was found with sores on his feet from standing barefoot so long. All 5 children were immediately placed under the care of Child Protective Services. What followed in the investigation would shock the state and the nation. For local authorities, it was deeply personal. Kanawhacounty prosecutor Deborah Rusnak later admitted to tears as she heard each guilty verdict, reminding everyone, if we're not going to fight for them, then who will? The children's own testimony painted a picture of relentless cruelty. They described being pepper-sprayed, Whitefeather even used a bear deterrent, and beaten for the smallest mistakes. They were forced into grueling chores, made to stand in lines for hours with their hands in the air, dig trenches with only their bare hands, and do farm labor without rest. Their meals were meager. According to testimony, the kids were given nothing but peanut butter sandwiches at set times, sometimes only leftovers from earlier. They were not allowed to snack or drink water outside those meals. Buckets became their toilets, even in freezing conditions. All the while, they endured daily racial abuse, slurs and insults aimed at reminding them they were seen as dirty and less than human. As one assistant prosecutor later summed up, the whole point of treating them this way is they become less than human. They told authorities, we were treated like slaves. And tragically, they were right. In court, Whitefeather was convicted on all charges, including federal civil rights violations for intentionally targeting the children because they were black. Lantz was convicted on all counts except the race-based charges. On March 19, 2025, Judge Mary Claire Akers delivered the sentence. Whitefeather, 215 years. Lantz, 160 years. Both without parole for decades. But the judge's words struck harder than the sentence itself. She told them, "You brought these children to West Virginia, a place I know as almost heaven, and you put them in hell. This court will now put you in yours. And may God have mercy on your souls. Because this court will not. As part of the verdict, the court ordered each defendant to pay at least $280,000 in restitution to the victims, though, as anyone could see, no amount of money will undo what those children endured. The toll was laid bare as the court heard impact statements. The eldest daughter, now 18, looked her captors in the eye and simply called them monsters, describing the nightmares and trust issues they've given her. One letter from a girl read, "I will be something amazing. I will be strong and beautiful. You will always be exactly what you are, horrible." Even the youngest child, in a note read aloud, said she was kept apart and told her siblings were bad, only to realize in her new home that everything was not right with Jeanne and Donald. In another twist, investigators later uncovered the couple's own texts calling the children monkeys and pigs. This wasn't just a case of child abuse. It was a systemic failure. How did two people with no parenting qualifications, no emotional stability, and clear signs of racism manage to adopt 5 vulnerable children? Why were they allowed to move across multiple states without anyone intervening? How did no one notice as that $318,000 in public assistance continued to flow, even as these kids were being tortured? Even the defense admitted flaws. They argued the child welfare system had dropped the ball despite multiple warnings. Now, authorities are asking hard questions. How many more families like this are hidden in plain sight? Who is watching the watchers? Final word, safety and social awareness message. No child deserves to suffer in silence. And no system should turn a blind eye to abuse, especially when the victims are already vulnerable. If you see something that doesn't feel right, speak up. Trust your instincts. Report suspicious behavior to local authorities or child welfare services. Your voice could be the one that breaks the silence for someone trapped in the dark. If you're considering adoption, do it for the right reasons. Not for money, not for image, not for control, but to truly give a child love, safety, and a future. Together, we can build a society where every child is safe, seen, and protected. Let's make almost heaven more than just a name. Let's make it a promise.